Hey keto friends, welcome to another episode of Be Well, Be Keto. And today's guest is super important to me personally. Her name is Amy Berger, and she is the author of the Alzheimer's Antidote. Amy wrote this thesis when she was getting her master's in nutrition, and it just snowballed into some massive success. And because my mom has Alzheimer's, I was really looking forward to picking Amy's brain. So without further ado, let's go say hi to this awesome woman.
Welcome to the Be Well, Be Keto podcast, where we showcase ordinary people who have achieved extraordinary results. Your host is the high energy girl, health coach, and personal trainer, Tracy Gluhite.
Create whole body wellness, a powerful new advancement in energy medicine. Increase your energy, empower your life. I am super excited to announce that I am now a bioenergetics practitioner. And many people are like, well, what is bioenergetics? So imagine that our body is controlled by our energy field, and these fields get distortions and blockages, which create physical and emotional symptoms. So how do we get energy blockages? From stress, toxins, EMFs, emotional traumas, physical scars, and physical traumas. All you need to do is decode the human body field to get to the root cause and restore your energy for life. For more information, head on over to the blog at highenergygirl.com/bioenergetics with an X. That's BIOENERGETIX, and heal your energy for life. Have you joined the Facebook group yet? I have a new Facebook group called High Energy Girls, and that is pretty much where I'm hanging out these days, and I would love to have you a part of the group. So head on over to High Energy Girls on Facebook. Hey, Amy, good morning. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
I am a big fan of yours, I have to tell you. So what happened was about 3.5 years ago, my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, dementia, and I did a bunch of nutritional research, stumbled upon a couple of different resources, and then I've been fighting with her this whole time to change her diet. And I don't remember when it was, but maybe a year, 2 years ago, I found your book, The Alzheimer's Antidote. When did you write that book?
It was published in March 2017, but I had released an ebook version of it, a very preliminary early version, about a year or two before that. And I really lucked out. A publisher found it on my friend's website and offered me a book deal. They said, wow, this is really important information. We want to get this out to a larger audience. So it's been out there a couple of years, but in the incarnation it is now, it's been out about 2 years.
Okay, so that's probably right about the time that I found it. And so for the listeners that don't know you yet, maybe there's one, why don't you tell them a little bit about you?
Sure. I'm a low-carb and ketogenic-oriented nutritionist, although I help people with other kinds of diets too. And I think I'm primarily known as a writer, though I write a blog at my website, which is toitnutrition.com. And let's see, I got into low-carb eating the way a lot of other people do. I mean, I'm a career changer. I wasn't always a nutritionist. I've been in and out of a lot of jobs before I got into nutrition professionally. But I found out about low-carb because I used to be heavier, and I was heavier despite exercising. I was kind of a sedentary kid. I was a couch potato kid, but as I got older, I began to exercise a lot more. I actually ran 2 marathons. I was in the Air Force. So, I'm not afraid of a hard workout. And I was eating what I thought was a healthy diet, lots of my whole grain bread with margarine and snacking on pretzels and granola bars and the whole 9 yards. And no matter what I did, I could not lose weight. And I really, I just felt like a failure for so many years because no matter how hard I worked, no matter what I did, I could not get the weight off. Never mind that I had friends that never exercised, that ate garbage and were thinner. And I'm not saying they were healthy, but they were thinner. And being a young woman in the United States in the 21st century, that's pretty much what life is all about. Sadly, you just want to look a certain way. And I didn't look that way. And I found the Atkins book, actually. It was the 1992 version, I think, of Dr. Atkins' New Diet Revolution. And it just made sense. It made sense to me why I could not lose weight when I was eating a high carb diet. And after having success with that, after it working like nothing else had ever worked before, I realized that I could help other people learn about this way of eating. Like I said, I had been in and out of jobs that I didn't really like. I had never really had any career satisfaction. And I said, hey, nutritionist is a career. Like maybe I could do that. And I could help other people with this. So I went to graduate school to get a master's in nutrition and got some other certifications. And here we are. But definitely I can say, and probably everyone listening knows, whatever field you're in, school was the beginning, not the end. I mean, once you get the degree, the learning never stops. I mean, even now, almost on a daily basis, I'm reading new articles and new scientific papers and learning new things that just kind of reinforce what I already know, but it just teaches me even more about why and how this way of eating works. And I should emphasize, obviously, it's not just for weight loss. I personally came into this from a weight loss goal, but having studied it for so many years now, I actually have come to believe that weight loss is the least impressive thing that this diet is capable of doing. When you look at improving blood sugar and type 2 diabetes and improving the lipid panel and joint pain and PCOS and like you name it. Oh, and by the way, you might also lose a few pounds.
Yeah, I like to say that the weight loss is a side effect of a healthier lifestyle change.
Right.
So so how long ago was that initial discovery of the low carb diet and that Atkins book you stumbled upon?
That was a long time ago, but it didn't stick the first time. I found the Atkins book. My mother got a copy of it at a yard sale, believe it or not. And she didn't read it, but I did. But this was probably my junior or senior year of college. So we're talking around 1998 or 99. And I tried it a couple of times. I just wasn't prepared to make it my life. I was, I would stick to it for a few days, and then invariably, somebody would bring in a piece of cake to my work study job. And so I wasn't really mentally set to say goodbye to the carbs at that point. It stuck for good around 2003. So it's been a long time that I've been eating this way. It's been over 15 years, but I will say I'm not always strictly ketogenic. I'm always some degree of low carb. Sometimes I'm more keto than others. Some days I have no carbs, some days I have 20 carbs, some days I have 100 carbs. So it really just depends on what's going on in my life or where I'm at. But I'm always somewhere on the spectrum of reduced carbohydrate.
Well, and that I think is a good point to bring up because, aren't we all just really looking for metabolic flexibility to some point?
I think so. And I think most people have that. Most people can probably eat a little more carbohydrate than they think they can. And that doesn't mean everyone has to. If people are happy living at 20 or 30 grams of carbs a day, that's fine. But they might be just fine at 50 or 70 grams of carbs, and they've just been made too scared to try. Or, if they have a history of type 2 diabetes or PCOS or, morbid obesity or something, they might not want to rock the boat. And I understand that, but I do think some people are starting to get a little too zealot-like. And just because not everybody can eat 70 or 100 grams of carbs and be fine doesn't mean nobody can.
Right. Well, think about it. If you look at 70 grams of carbs, 70 times 4, so that's only 280 calories. You can burn that fast. I would think that you can burn through 280 calories of glucose pretty darn fast.
Yeah,
right?
but yeah. But it's still, some people are more sensitive than others. I don't want to pretend that doesn't exist.
Sure.
But I just, I just, as much as I love the keto world, sometimes we do go a little too far. Some people really do need strict ketosis as a medical therapy. Mm-hmm. Some people, I have clients, some people do just fine on more of a paleo diet, which is not even really low carb by definition, but because you're not really eating refined sugars and you're not eating any grain, it's generally lower carb than a standard type diet. Even if you're eating a bit of fruit or a bit of sweet potatoes and stuff like that, your total carb intake is a lot lower than most people's.
So when you work with those people and they're on paleo, which I think is another really healthy way to eat, if they're on paleo, do they actually produce ketones? So do they get that mind, the mental clarity benefit?
Most of them don't really measure. So, pardon me, I have a cough. I can't really say whether in ketosis or not. They're probably not, but that's fine. Not everybody needs to be in ketosis. Not everybody needs that specific state of ketosis to have sharp thinking or to have good physical energy. Most of the people that do more of a paleo diet do it because I actually encourage them to increase carbs. And I know that's total heresy right now in the keto world. Like, I don't want to give people the wrong idea. I absolutely celebrate the ketogenic diet and low carb diet. I eat more low carb myself, but I have had clients who just don't feel their best eating that way. And I think it tends to be women who exercise a lot. Very, frequently, many times a week with a lot of intensity and a lot of volume. And some people can do that on a ketogenic diet just fine. A lot of people can't. And under those circumstances, like, I really don't think some butternut squash is going to be harmful. And in fact, the people, they tend to start feeling better. And I'm not talking 200 or 300 grams of carbs a day. I'm talking, 50 to 100 from somebody who was eating maybe 10 or 15 grams of carbs. Let's bump that up to like 70, 75 and see how you do.
Yeah, I think that person's still going to produce ketones, because if they're working out like that, there's no way they're going to have enough stored glucose for fuel. I'm in the fitness business, like I'm in fitness, and I work out right now. I'm working out 7 days a week, not on purpose, but I'm doing a yoga teacher training. So my days off are spent, doing too much yoga. And like yesterday, I taught a TRX spin class, so, really good workout. And I don't think I ate my first meal until 3:30, and that's only because I needed to eat before I went to yoga. So, I think, and I do believe in bio-individuality, so I think that you're, spot on with some people not feeling good on different things, Yeah,
well, and the ketogenic threshold definitely varies. Some people have to be under 20 or 30 grams of carbs a day to reach ketosis. Some can have 50 or 60 grams of carbs a day and still be in ketosis. And it's like you said, it tends to be people that are very, very active. It tends to be younger people. And usually guys have an easier time getting into ketosis with higher carbs than women do. But women can still do it if they're active enough and they're young.
Yeah. So tell me so I found you because of your book. Let's talk about Alzheimer's, how you got to writing the book, and just kind of go down that path. It's a personal quest for me because my mom is degrading and it's just breaking my heart.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. That's it's a terrifying illness. And the way I came to study it is I actually have no family history of it, but I do have a family history of type 2 diabetes, obesity, stroke, and cancer. So we're all stocked up in my family. We didn't need the Alzheimer's on top of it. But they regularly now refer to Alzheimer's disease as type 3 diabetes or diabetes of the brain. And the first place that I ever came across a possible connection between glucose and insulin in the brain and Alzheimer's was in Gary Taubes's book, Good Calories, Bad Calories. Some of your listeners are probably familiar with that book. If you're not, it's highly recommended. It can be tough to get through. It's not an easy read, but it's a phenomenal book. It's one of the best books I've read on any nutritional topic. And because I didn't have a family history of it, it was interesting to me, but it didn't really captivate me. But I said, oh, that's interesting. I'll file that away in the back of my mind to kind of study some other time. And it was a couple of years later that I was in graduate school for nutrition and I had to pick my thesis topic. And I said, what is a topic that I could write about that hasn't already been written about a million times, and something that I would actually enjoy learning about and enjoy writing a paper about, and something that there would even be enough information about in the scientific literature that I could do a thesis on it. And I said, let me go back to that Alzheimer's thing and see what's there. And I quite literally was stunned, just blown away by what I found, even in my preliminary search. Like if people know the search engine PubMed, where they publish all the scientific papers and stuff, I started looking there for like insulin, Alzheimer's, glucose, Alzheimer's. It is everywhere, hiding in plain sight, as they say. I mean, you can't look at research on Alzheimer's and not see this. You have to be deliberately ignoring it to not see all of the research indicating that this is a metabolic problem in the brain. It's a fuel shortage in the brain. And when I say that, what that means is, I said they call Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes. And where that comes from is that the major fundamental problem in the brain of somebody with this disease is that neurons in affected regions have lost the ability to get energy from glucose. So these cells are basically starving and they're atrophying, they're physically withering and shrinking. You can see this on an MRI. You can see the volume of the brain shrink. And it's coming because these cells are starving because they can't metabolize glucose properly. And the $1 million question is why? We don't know. We don't know why it's happening, but we do know that that is the problem.
Yes. And I totally get that. And I have mentioned that before to people. And so many people like go, that's impossible. And like I was at a girls' night out with some friends and one of them's in like medical sales. And we were talking about that exact thing. She said, there is nothing you can do like that about Alzheimer's. And the fact that she was arguing with me about nutrition, I was just like, what? And, but yeah, I'm going to actually get that. So that book, Good Calories, Bad Calories, does that address it too? Or did you use that as a resource for your book?
No, that wasn't really a resource. That was just my sort of introduction to the fact that this was even a possibility. Like, whoa, maybe Alzheimer's is actually a metabolic, like a glucose and insulin problem, just like type 2 diabetes and PCOS and cardiovascular disease and gout and hypertension and all this other sort of metabolic syndrome stuff. People might have heard the term metabolic syndrome, and that was originally called insulin resistance syndrome. And now, instead of just metabolic syndrome, you can actually, again, search on PubMed. There's papers describing a phrase called metabolic cognitive syndrome, because more and more researchers have become aware that there is a connection between metabolic syndrome, meaning chronically high insulin, and cognitive decline.
Wow. That's crazy. And your book was so eye-opening. I mean, there was a time when I was helping my mom, taking her shopping and planning her meals and doing all this stuff for her because I wanted her to follow your plan. And she was like, it's too hard to not eat bread. And I'm like, Mom, isn't it harder to lose your brain and your memory?
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult. I like bread too, but you know what? I like my size 6 pants better. But I don't mean to be flip. I mean, to compare weight loss to Alzheimer's is like, it's insulting to people with Alzheimer's. But I think if people understood the metabolic and sort of biochemical underpinnings of this disease more, if they sort of understood that this is a real thing, it might make it easier for them to make that dietary change. I can totally understand that it's really difficult for someone to make a major change in something that they eat every day, probably multiple times a day, if they don't have a lot of faith that it even matters.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It's like compliant. They have to be committed. So for me, it's like just commitment to changing your life.
Yeah, you have to commit, but you have to have faith that it's going to work. And I think that's part of the missing piece. People like, well, what does diet have to do with Alzheimer's? And here's the thing. And I'm sympathetic to people. I'm empathetic. Like I said, I understand it has to be really hard to even entertain the possibility that this could be a diet and lifestyle disease, right? Because for so long, we've sort of been led to believe it's so complicated. It's so mysterious. There's so much we don't know. And that is true. All of that is absolutely true. But just because we don't have all the answers doesn't mean we don't have any answers. And, I like to remind people that with Alzheimer's disease, they used to joke and call it old-timers disease, right? Because it used to
Yeah.
be an old people disease. It used to be an elderly people disease. People's grandparents got this when they were like 97. They called it senility, right? Oh, grandma's senile, grandpa's senile, he's lost his mind. Um, but we are no longer talking about elderly people. We're talking about people in their 50s and 60s becoming afflicted with this. And rates of Alzheimer's disease are exploding in the same way that rates of type 2 diabetes and obesity and hypertension and all of the metabolic syndrome complications are exploding. And to dismiss even the possibility that Alzheimer's could be every bit a diet and lifestyle illness, just like all those other ones are, to me is foolishness to like not even give that idea any thought at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like you said, it's on PubMed, it's everywhere. And your book is a great resource. So I really want to encourage any of the listeners today to go out, and I'm sure you know somebody with Alzheimer's, to read her book, because Amy's book is amazing. And I think I've already loaned it out to somebody else who needed to read it for a family member. But it was life-changing for me to understand, because I used to bash low carb back when I didn't know, because I've always been in fitness. And I thought, oh, I need, if I'm going to run a long race, I need that glucose. I need that fuel. And I had no clue that it was possible to do all the athletics that I can do without it.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit. There's two more topics I want to address. One is your journey. So you're talking about your size 6 pants. I just kind of want to like get to know you a little bit better and your personal experience, and then address what we were speaking of earlier about the low carb versus the dogma of keto, and kind of get into that a little bit more. Is that cool?
Oh, that's cool. But I just want to go back, not to plug too hard, but I don't know if we actually mentioned the name of my book. So my book is called The Alzheimer's Antidote, and you can find that on Amazon, and there is a Kindle version. There's no audio version yet. We've had some requests. I'm not sure if that will be coming yet or not, but you can find the print and the Kindle on Amazon.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Alzheimer's Antidote. Thank you for mentioning that. I don't know if we even talked about that, but I would definitely, that's the best book. So, and I think it's the only book I've seen on Alzheimer's.
Oh, there's a couple of other books, but I think they all add something to the conversation, but I think my book, truly not to toot my own horn or anything, but I think my book does the best job of explaining the science in plain English and showing people how simple it can be and how uncomplicated it can be to implement a low carb diet. And, I have tips in there if you are working with someone elderly, if they can't chew properly, if they have digestive problems, as a lot of older people do. I also have entire chapters in there devoted to sort of debunking the myths about red meat and cholesterol and saturated fat being harmful, because if I'm going to tell old, sick people to eat egg yolks and butter and steak, I have to really say, like, well, no, it's totally fine. You're not going to give yourself a heart attack. And so Dr. Dale Bredesen wrote a book called The End of Alzheimer's, and Dr. Mary Newport has a book called something like the coconut oil and low carb solution to Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, something to that effect. But they all add something to the conversation. But I'm actually a writer first and a nutritionist second. My undergraduate degree is in writing and my graduate degree is in nutrition. So for me to be able to combine both, I sort of make it my goal, not just in that book, but even in my blog and in my YouTube videos, to translate the complicated, scary sounding biochem and physiology into very understandable English and helpful analogies so people can put all that stuff into practice in their daily life.
Oh, well, I'm going to have to check out your YouTube channel. I have not seen that yet. So where did you come up with the name for your website?
Oh, so if we put a link, people can see there's a link. My website is Tuit Nutrition, TUIT Nutrition. And a lot of people sort of assume that must come from like intuitive eating, intuition. And that would have been a smarter explanation, but that's not actually where it comes from. I may be revealing my age here, but when I was a kid, my mother had a little wooden coin that she kept in her purse. And on one side of the coin, it had in big block letters, TUIT, Tuit. And on the back of it, it had this little explanation that said something about, you're always putting things off until you get around to it. Oh, I'll do that when I get around to it. Someday I'll get around to it. So this little round wooden coin was the round to it. So, all right, now you have a round to it. Now you got to stop making excuses. Now you got to get to it. So I said, all right, when are you going to get serious about your health? When are you going to get serious about your diet? When you get to it? Well, now you have to it nutrition. There is actually, if people go to my website, there's a tab, I think, that says why to it, and they can see the explanation and even see a picture of that little coin right there.
That is hilarious. Oh my gosh, I love it. And you're a young pup compared to me, so I
don't know. You sound young, but let's, a woman never reveals her age, so we'll just,
Well, my listeners know I'm 53, so.
Oh, you are. You sound like a kid. Oh my gosh.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm a young 53. Definitely a young 53. So, Amy, you said you got into a size 6. What size were you before?
Well, I'm smaller than a 6 now. I think 6 was just the number I blurted out. At my heaviest, I was about an 18, and it's when I was in high school, actually. And so I've never been obese, and I've never had morbid obesity, and so I never claim that I understand what it's like to not fit into a booth at a restaurant, or, to need a seatbelt extender on a plane. Honestly, there's so much shame and stigma around body size in our society that it would be, insulting to those people for me to claim that I know what it's like to be that size when I don't. But I'm 5'2", and I was about an 18, and at my heaviest, the heaviest that I know I weighed about 158. And I say it's the heaviest I know I was because I may have been heavier and I just didn't get on the scale. And unfortunately, there is no photographic evidence of me at my heaviest because, frankly, I didn't want my picture taken. And now I'm anywhere from like a 4 to a 6. But the truth is, and all the women listening know, women's clothing sizes are so weird that in my closet right now, there's anything from like a 4 to a 12, and they kind of all fit.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the 10s and 12s might be a little bit baggy, but they're not falling off me, and the 4s aren't really tight. I mean, it's a jungle out there with women's clothing sizes, but yeah. So I was, yeah. I don't know what else to say. I was heavier, but I think what killed me is that I was heavier in spite of how hard I was working to not be heavier.
So when you were working to not be heavier, what kinds of things were you doing? And then what did you change exactly to change your pathway?
Right. One thing I should say before I sort of answer that is that when all this was going on, at least as far as I knew then, all I really had was the excess weight. I wasn't sick. I didn't have diabetes. I didn't have PCOS. There's no doubt in my mind that had I continued eating and living the way I was, I probably would be dealing right now with some of those problems. But at the time, I think I was young enough, and maybe all that physical activity, even though it didn't keep me thin, it may have sort of given me a little bit of wiggle room against some of those metabolic problems. So what was I doing? I mean, I was kind of a cardio queen, but even I did a lot of lifting too, but I did a lot of running, although I should probably call it more like jogging because I'm a turtle. I'm not a fast runner. But I've completed 2 marathons, so I have endurance, but I do not have speed. I am slow. But I did a lot of running, lots of carbohydrate. Just lots of, whole wheat bread. I mean, being a student or being just even when I was out in the workforce and I was younger, not making a ton of money, just trying to pay my rent. What's cheap? Pasta's cheap, rice is cheap, and guess what? It's fat free. There's no fat in it, and tons and tons of cereal. I lived on cereal and skim milk. So lots of very low fat and fat free foods. And that's not to say I had an extremely low fat diet. I mean, I was getting fat from margarine and soybean oil and, who knows what. But there was one period of time where I was actually unemployed and living with my parents. and I had nothing better to do but work out. So I would go to the gym 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening, and I still didn't lose weight. If anything, I gained a little bit of body fat. And, you being in the fitness world, you probably understand a lot of that was my body's stress response. My body it was protecting me by holding on to all that fat because I was putting my body under so much stress.
Yeah. Yeah, and it adapts to what you're doing, and it goes, uh-oh, here she goes again. So that chronic cardio is brutal.
Yeah.
So before I started this yoga teacher training, I was just doing 5 days a week so that I could make sure that I was getting a balance of fitness, more of the heavyweight focus, but, Pilates and different boot camp classes and stuff, but making sure I took 2 full days of rest every week so your body can actually adapt or make the healing and make the gains that you need. The chronic cardio world is just not the place to be. So I hear ya. And then you found the Atkins book, and then you went on your own journey. And then tell us like some wisdom that you learned along the way.
I guess, like I said earlier, when I was new to low carb, there was only a few books. There was the Atkins book. There was a book called Protein Power by Mike and Mary Dan Eads, a total classic in the low carb world. And there was one forum. There was really only one online forum at the time. This was kind of the early days of the internet. And I was actually better off because there was so much less information available than there is now. But because there was less information, there was less misinformation. I really do not envy the people that are new to it now because it's so wonderful that this way of eating has become so popular, but because it's become so popular, there's all these new people coming into it who are espousing all kinds of wacky stuff that is totally unscientific or maybe works for them by some weird coincidence, but it's not going to work for anybody else. And there's just, when I was new, you couldn't even measure blood ketones unless you were in like a scientific study. All that existed to measure ketones were the urine test strips. There was no blood meter. There was no breath meter. It was almost impossible to get a blood glucose meter unless you actually had diabetes and your doctor would prescribe you one. There was no, apps didn't even exist. Cell phones didn't exist when I was brand new to this. So like there was no apps, there was no tracking and measuring. And don't get me wrong, all of that can be helpful. All of it can be educational and eye-opening, but it's not required for anybody. You can be successful with the reduced carb diet or a ketogenic diet without making yourself crazy over all the data.
Yeah, that's a good point, because then I think everybody's like personality, like I'm a free spirit personality, so I am not the type that likes to track and measure and be planning and organizing and all that. But some people, they thrive off of that stuff, Yeah, I'm the dead opposite. I am not a numbers person. But I respect that some people are. And like I said, it can be helpful, especially if you're stalled in whatever your goal is, whether it's losing body fat or improving your blood sugar, improving your insulin, clearing up your skin, whatever issue you have, if it's not improving, that's the time to sort of keep track of everything you're doing, because maybe you're eating a lot more carbs than you realize, or maybe you're snacking throughout the day all day and you don't realize. But even with things like the exogenous ketones or MCT oil and coconut oil, this stuff wasn't readily available. Like you could not go to the supermarket in 1999 and find MCT oil. You could not find it. And people did great. People did great on the Atkins diet. They did great on Protein Power. They did great even on South Beach, or there was a book called the Schwarzbein Principle. Again, Diana Schwarzbein.
Yeah, Diana Schwarzbein. All of these are just variations on carbohydrate reduction. And people got great results without the exogenous ketones, without measuring the blood ketones, without the apps, without fasting. And so I would say like 85% of what I do with my nutrition clients is debunk all these myths and sort of set the record straight and help them understand that this is actually so much simpler and more straightforward than they've been led to believe.
So you said something a couple minutes ago that I want to break down a little bit. And that was, you said all of these people out there spouting off all this stuff that works maybe for them, but it won't work for anybody else. Can you kind of debunk some of those myths?
Yeah, I guess I should clarify. I probably spoke a little too strongly. What we have to understand, like everybody's entitled to and welcome to share their own story, right? Because it's going to resonate with somebody. Somebody like me, I'm a 40-year-old female, I'm 5'2", I've never had six-pack abs. I can't relate to, Joe hot guy six-pack ab on the internet who starts his day with his fatty coffee and his MCT bomb and who knows what, and he can still look the way he looks. But somebody else can, and there's going to be some postmenopausal woman who's been calorie restricted for 30 years. She's fatigued, she's depressed, she's chubby. She can't relate to that guy either. So we all need to find people that sort of that we can relate to, but not only that, like it's everything works for somebody, but that doesn't mean everything works for everybody. Meaning, I get so many people coming to me saying, I don't know why I'm not losing weight. I'm eating 80% fat. I have this fat macro, blah, blah, blah. And some people can do very, very well with a very high fat intake. Some can't. Many people, especially the older women that struggle with fat loss, do better with a bit higher protein and less fat. And that doesn't mean low fat. It just means less fat than they've been led to believe they should be eating. There is literally no such thing as ketogenic ratios or ketogenic macros, unless if you are a child or an adult with epilepsy and you need to have some kind of precise ratio in order to control seizures. That's a different ballgame. When you're using a lower carbohydrate diet to lose body fat or to manage some kind of hyperinsulinemic or metabolic syndrome type issue, then what matters the most and what's responsible for the vast majority of effects and benefits of this diet is the very, very low carbohydrate intake, not the very, very high fat intake. So there's a lot of people who are, adding lots and lots of butter and oil to things, which keeps them in ketosis because, as long as their carbs are low enough, they'll be in ketosis. But all ketosis means is that you are burning fat. It doesn't mean you're burning your body fat. You could be burning all the butter and the oil and the cheese and the almonds and the macadamia nuts and the cream. So I don't want to scare people off from fat. This is still a high fat diet, but it might not be super high in fat, especially if you're struggling to lose body fat. So in terms of like people having to personalize things, and you can't just necessarily assume that what works for somebody else out there is going to work for you. There's general principles that apply to everybody, right? What makes this diet work is the very low carbohydrate intake. Some of us can have more fat, some of us can't. Some of us, some of us are more sensitive to dairy than others. We all have our own, we've been around the block a little bit. Some of us, we have our own metabolic histories and health and medication histories and lifestyle situations. And sometimes it's frustrating and it can be disappointing and discouraging, but sometimes it takes a lot of experimentation to find something that's going to work.
Yeah, and everybody's different. And I like what you said because I am not a high-fat keto person. I like meat more, just like a protein with avocado. That's like my favorite food. But I would rather, and I'd like the listeners to think about this, I would rather burn my belly fat instead of butter fat.
Yeah.
Is that something that you would agree with? Like you'd rather burn your body fat for ketones instead of the ingested fat?
Oh, absolutely. But again, I have to emphasize because people, in the modern world, people like sometimes hear what they want to hear, or they read what they want to read instead of what the person actually said or wrote. So I agree with you that yes, many of us don't do so well with the super, super high fat intake, but I don't want to make people afraid of fat. So this diet, again, it's still a high fat diet, but you don't necessarily have to go out of your way. Like if you're already eating a fatty steak, you don't have to pour olive oil on top of it. You don't have to melt cheese on it. You can if you want to, but then don't come to me upset that you're not losing weight. And, like I said, using a ketogenic diet as a medical therapy for certain conditions requires a sort of different approach than using it for something like fat loss or PCOS or migraines and things like that. And I do think that when people are new to this, when people are first transitioning to this way of eating, I don't recommend restricting fat at all. I think they should enjoy the heck out of everything they eat and let their body become adjusted. Let the body make the transition to becoming a fat burner from formerly having been a carb burner, and then fine tune. Like once you're over the hump, then you can fine tune the numbers.
And how long does that take?
It's different for everybody. Some people listening might have heard of something called the keto flu, and that is usually a very temporary thing. That's usually only a couple of days, and that tends to be anything like really, really terrible headaches, dizziness, nausea, lightheadedness, and it has to do with sort of electrolyte shifts and fluid shifts. And just because it's such that happens when you rip the Band-Aid off all at once and you sort of go overnight from eating a regular high-carb modern diet to a very, very low-carb diet. You can sort of ward that off by doing it more gradually, but that's really the worst of it, and it tends to pass within a couple of days. What takes a little bit longer is, especially if you're an athlete, to recover your full performance. You will see a decline in performance at first. You won't have the same power and strength and endurance, but once you get adapted, you will recover that, and it usually becomes even better. You set new personal records in various aspects after you're adjusted. And then for some people, if you're not an athlete, the fat adaptation, which is where you can sort of go, and I don't necessarily mean fasting, but you can go several hours without eating and you don't get that hypoglycemic, shaky, angry sort of feeling. You can just go a lot longer than you used to go without eating, or you have much more mental clarity. That can take anywhere from weeks to months, but it usually doesn't take that long.
Okay. So with that said, so when I first started keto, I didn't get the keto flu. I didn't really know what I was doing. I just read like one little book, and I kind of just did it the way you're saying. I just cut out the carbs. I just ate lots of vegetables, and that was about it. And I never registered ketones on the urine test strips. Never. And I did on the blood. And when I switched over and did the blood, I did. Do you have any explanation for that?
I wish I did. You'll hear all sorts of things out there on, the interwebs, quote, quote, about measuring ketones. And the first thing you'll sort of hear is that the urine strips are not accurate after you've been low carb for a while. And that seems to be true, but only for some people, because I myself, like I said, have been eating this way for over 15 years, and those urine strips still work for me. And they still work for many other people I know who've been doing this for a long time. But I have heard that for other people, they don't work. And I say, well, maybe you're just not in ketosis, and that's okay, because you can be fat adapted. You can have a fat-based metabolism without being actually in the state of ketosis. You can be running on fat and just not generate high ketones. But so I thought, well, if you're not registering ketones, that's okay. You're just not in ketosis, and that's fine. You don't have to be. But some people report, like just like you said, the urine strips don't show anything, but when they measure the blood, it does register. And all I can say is that the type of ketone molecules that are registered in the blood, breath, and urine are 3 different molecules. So for whatever reason, it could be that your body was not excreting a lot of acetoacetate, which is the one measured in urine, and maybe it was just generating the beta hydroxybutyrate, which is the one we measure in the blood. So, people can choose to measure any which way they want. Nobody has to measure. They don't have to measure. They can if they want to. I think measuring at first with the urine strips is great because if nothing else, it's a really good source of motivation. When you see that strip turn pink or purple, it's sort of visible proof that your body has made the switch to running on fat. We're like, oh, it's working. I'm in ketosis. But it's really not necessary to measure long term because what matters is whether or not you're getting the results you want. Your ketone level doesn't matter. If you want to lose body fat, it doesn't matter what your ketone level is. It matters whether or not you're losing body fat. If you want to improve your type 2 diabetes, it doesn't matter what your ketone level is. It matters if your blood sugar is getting better. So I think the measuring can be helpful, but it's not essential. And the blood, it's expensive. Let's not joke around. Those test strips are expensive. So I'm not opposed to testing, but people shouldn't feel like they have to. And the thing is, I have a blog post, maybe we can link to it in the notes or something, about measuring ketones, because I think there's a lot of people who measure that don't really understand how to interpret the numbers they see, because ketone levels naturally will fluctuate a lot, not only throughout the day, but in response to exercise, in response to meals, in response to changes in our sleep patterns. And so you can't just take one measurement and define your entire life by it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I was coaching this couple and she registered ketones pretty quickly and he did not, so he quit. And so it was just really sad. I was so heartbroken, and I tried to explain to him my story that I never registered ketones on the urine strip. So, and I love what Louise from Keto Gain says. Are we chasing ketones or are we chasing results?
Yeah. Oh, I love the Keto Gains guys, and I could not agree with that more. And we've become so far removed from listening to our own bodies that instead of saying, do I feel well? Do I have energy? Do my joints not hurt? Do I feel great? Is my thinking clear? Is my mood bright? Instead of relying on that intuition and asking ourselves genuinely honest questions about our body and our mind, we rely on these devices and these trackers and these apps and these watches. And I think that that's a shame. And again, there's a time and a place for this stuff. I'm not opposed to the fact that this kind of technology exists, but we should not outsource our well-being to some stupid gadget with a number on it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And because I always say with a scale, do you let that scale control your mood? Is it a source of your happiness or unhappiness,
Well, for a lot of women it is, and men too. And that's the sad part. I throw the scale out, But no, I understand it can be just like any of those measuring devices. It can be a gauge, but I mean, the scale is such a great example as to how dangerous that can become, where we do if you're in the fitness world, and you probably work with a lot of women and maybe men too, but sadly we do let it control our lives.
Yeah. And, but again, along with the tracking, some people, it's just a tool. Like my husband, he can weigh himself every day. He doesn't get emotionally attached to the outcome. So for him, it's fine. For me, on the other hand, if, in the past, I would be obsessed with that number. Now I'm kind of just, I don't weigh myself very often, but anyways. So Amy, really quick. So what is your favorite meal? If you were just to have your go-to, what do you eat?
Oh my gosh. I'm too much of a foodie to have one single favorite meal. My favorite meal, I don't know. I love ribs. I used to hate ribs, but I like ribs when they are meaty. Because ribs can be kind of messy to eat. And if this is going to sound a little dirty, but if I'm going to get that messy, I want there to be a lot of meat there,
Oh, yeah.
So I love a good barbecue joint with some brisket or some ribs and pulled pork. And, fortunately, a lot of barbecue restaurants make the meat plain, and so you can just leave the sauce off because the sauces are loaded with sugar. Or if it's something you make at home, you can just make your own sugar-free sauce or just have no sauce. But I cook very simply at home. I often just do a bunless burger with bacon or egg or something on it or some pickles. I'm super simple. But it's easy for me to say that I'm not married and I have no kids, so I don't have to make a meal to feed, 4 picky toddlers and my husband. And so if, I'm perfectly fine having a can of salmon and some chopped up green pepper for lunch. So yeah, it's hard to pick a favorite meal though. That's like picking a favorite star in the sky.
Well, that sounds good. Ribs. I love making ribs. You know what I do with those so that I avoid the sugary sauce? Because I make homemade sauce for the family, but for me, I just use wing sauce.
Yeah, no, I mean, hot sauces, vinegars, mustard, stuff like that are great. And there are a lot more available now, sort of sugar-free or paleo-friendly sauces. Unfortunately, they're kind of expensive, but they do exist if you have the budget for it.
Yeah.
And you can make it yourself too if you want to go to the effort, for sure.
It's kind of sweet though. Like the sauce I make for the family is pretty tangy. And I love my burgers, like burger with avocado, red onion, bacon. Have you tried that Chipotle mayo from Primal Kitchen?
I have. I'm kind of an oddball. I'm not a big fan of Chipotle flavoring, and everyone else is. And I would say the same thing about salted caramel. Everybody loves that in everything now. I'm not a salted caramel girl.
Yeah, I'm not either. Chocolate. There's a company called Perfect Keto that has these chocolate protein bars. Oh my gosh, they're so good. They're really good. I try not to eat bars though because I'm kind of a sweet addict. So once I get started on something sweet, I keep wanting more and more.
Right.
So I just try to stick with savory food because it's hard to overeat that for me personally.
Yeah.
So Amy, what's next for you? Do you have any fun things happening coming down the pipeline?
Let's see. I will be speaking at an event I think it's the very end of April in Salt Lake City. I don't know the website, but people can search for low carb keto Salt Lake and that should come up. I'm one of many low carb and keto speakers that'll be there. And then there's a big diabetes event in Sweden in June. So that'll be fun. I'll be there. And other than that, I started a YouTube channel not long ago, and I started it mainly because my blog posts tend to be very, very long. And some people love that. Some people can't get enough of reading all the details. But there's a lot of people that are just never going to read a really long blog post. But they'll watch a 30-minute video, even if the blog post would have only taken them 12 minutes to read. But they'll sooner watch a long video. And I realized that, I could reach a lot more people through videos. And not only could I reach more people, and I'm still writing the blog, but I'm doing videos in addition. I really started the videos because, frankly, I'm so aggravated by the misinformation I see out there. And now instead of having to write a really long email response to somebody that asks me a question for help, I can just say, here, watch this video. I explained it all. And other than that, I may be creating some ebooks in the near future, just little small ebooks on individual topics related to keto and low carb and nutrition in general, but no specific details on that yet. Probably not coming out until summer.
Mm-hmm. And how can people find you and all of the good blogs and what is your handle on all of that? What's your website again?
Right. My website is tuitnutrition.com. Again, that's TUIT nutrition.com. And that's my handle on Twitter. It's Tuit Nutrition. My YouTube channel is the same name. It goes by Tuit Nutrition. And the book is The Alzheimer's Antidote. And that's about it. I have a Facebook page, but I really am not a big fan of Facebook. So I do almost nothing there. So don't bother friending me. I probably won't friend you back. And so don't take it personally. I just don't use Facebook all that much.
So best place is probably your website, yeah?
Yeah. People can contact me directly there, or I'm on Twitter all day. I'm addicted, so I'm pretty responsive there if people want to write to me.
Okay, so tell me why you like Twitter better than Facebook.
Oh, man. I wish I knew. I've actually been trying to figure this out because it seems like some type of psychological preference, like an issue, and I don't know why. I can say that I'm extremely introverted, and Facebook to me, and I could be wrong, Facebook feels more intrusive. Twitter feels like I can just pop in and pop out. I can write a tweet of 20 words, something pithy, something funny, and leave and come back 5 hours later. And the truth is I could do that on Facebook too. But I just find it harder to keep up with Facebook, and it's overwhelming to me, I guess. Twitter doesn't feel as overwhelming. And it's funny because I've heard this from other people too. We love Twitter and we dislike Facebook, and no one can really like articulate exactly why.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm kind of the opposite. I've never really gotten into Twitter. And for Facebook, I do it more for educational purposes, like I'm really more into finding articles, sharing good things that I love and connecting, because I'm not one of those that has to post everything I do,
Right. Oh, you mean you're capable of eating a meal and not showing everybody? How nice.
Yeah. No, that's totally not me. My food does not look pretty.
Right.
It's always really simple. So, hey, even with your cough, I feel so bad that you were so sweet to come on the show today with that. I know what that cough's like. Mine, like I said earlier, lasted forever. Thank you so much for your inspiration with your book, and for I'm going to tell my mom that I interviewed you, talked to you, and I'm like, Mom, you've got to do this.
Cool. Thank you. And depending on how far into the disease process she is, she might not need keto. She might just need to kind of go grain free, almost like a paleo diet, but she might benefit from some extra MCT oil because of we specifically want to elevate ketones to feed the brain. So there's certain things that I might recommend for an Alzheimer's patient that I wouldn't recommend for somebody trying to lose body fat. It's a slightly different approach, but certainly no one's health ever got worse by cutting out sugar and refined carbs.
Yes, that is a really good point.
Yeah.
It's not going to hurt you, it can only help. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amy. I hope that your cold heals quickly, and I love listening to your wisdom. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, that just was mind-blowing. I loved talking with her, and I loved how she said that the science is there if you open your eyes and see it, that Alzheimer's is correlated like it's type 2 or type 3 diabetes. And I just find that so fascinating, you guys. We just need to educate the world around us, teach them that sugar and carbs are not going to get them in life where they want to go. It's not going to help us age stronger or feel younger, but just be aging in sickness and poor health. So if you like this episode, please share it with a friend. And I'm sure you know somebody who's been in touch with Alzheimer's. I highly recommend Amy's book. So thank you so much for listening, and make it a great day. This podcast contains the opinion and thoughts of its host and guests. It is intended to provide helpful and informative material on the subjects covered. All statements made on the podcast have not been evaluated by the FDA and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. If the listener requires professional assistance or advice, please contact your personal medical doctor. Both host and guest specifically disclaim any responsibility for any liability, loss, or risk, personal or otherwise, which is incurred as a consequence directly or indirectly of the use and application of any of the contents of these episodes. Like I said, this is my opinion, and I could be wrong.